Hey guys, welcome back to Maple Syrup Tech. So like I said, we're keeping going with another video on the retro gaming side. Last time we fixed a couple of NES carts. Today we're going to be looking at fixing a couple of controllers. What we're going to start out, as you can see, I have Castlevania already running here. Castlevania is one of my favorite games to test out controllers. Reason why, it uses both buttons and the direction pads from the start of the game. And second, before you get into the castle, there's no bad guys. So you actually get a chance to just test the controller out and make sure everything's responding as it should. So we're going to try these two controllers. When I bought them, I got them for $5 for both because they're pretty banged up, and you should see a close-up on the screen of what they look like physically, like they're pretty scratched up and whatnot. And the guy at the shop told me that one of the two is supposedly broken, so we are going to not just have a cleaning today, but most likely repair to do. Of course, it's the same thing as cartridges. A lot of the repairs come down to just cleaning and sometimes really, scraping off some corrosion from contacts. But we'll see about that when we open them. So let's test out the controllers, figure out which one is broken, and move on from there. So we've got the game started. Well, good sign is this one. We already know that the start button is functioning. So, D-pad, we got backwards, forwards, we got crouch, so D-pad seems fine on this one. Secondly, A button jump is fine, and B is fine as well. So this seems to be a perfectly good controller, although, like I said, the physical condition is pretty poor. So, good sign, we have at least one working controller. So we're going to working on cleaning that one. Now let's test out the second one. I'm assuming that if that one was working, this must be the broken controller. So we have the second controller in, and right away, he is right. I have no life from the D-pad. So right, left, up, down, no crouching, no nothing from the D-pad. Pause does work, however, if you can hear the sound. And we've got jump and we've got B. So this one has really a defective D-pad. So we'll open up, we'll start with a cleaning and see what it's all about. So we're going to switch now to our cleaning process, see what we're going to be using, and we're going to go from there. So for the first step, we're going to take the controllers apart and we're going to clean the outer shell. So basically, all you're going to need for this is a regular Phillips head screwdriver. There are six screws on the controller. We're going to start by taking those apart. Perfect. So now that we have them all apart, first thing we want to do, separate the screws. So we have to make sure that we have all 12 screws for both pads. They stay stuck like that, just knock them out from the inside. They should become straight out. But sometimes controllers, especially if they haven't been opened up in a really long time, they can stay stuck in there a bit. There we go. That's 6 and 12. Now we're actually going to clean out the screw. We're actually going to clean the screws as well because there's quite a bit of corrosion on some of them. So put that to the side. We want to take out the PCBs. Now the one thing is I am going to mark the one that had the defective D-pad. I'm just going to play around the PCB like so that I know that this is the one with the defective D-pad. We're going to separate also all the insides, so you're going to want to take out the D-pad, the buttons, all that. We'll put that aside. We're going to be separating, like I said, the PCBs. That's just because we're going to be working on them separately while the covers are cleaning. So, now that we've got all this separate, there's only one thing left to do, which is to remove the basically the covers here. It doesn't appear like it, but yes, you can remove the covers. So for that, all you're going to need is a little hobby knife like this, and you start working at the corners, seeing if there's one that you can lift off. See here, I managed to get it in the middle because there was a little bit of room to work with. And you just slide it around the side like that till you get to one of the corners. The adhesive is not very strong, so once you get to one of the corners, you can just peel it off. And don't worry, you can replace them very easily after. So basically, once I get to a corner, just peel it off, making sure just not to tear or warp it. And we can see that there is actually a big discoloration color between the outside and inside. The clean I'm going to do isn't really necessarily to get the color right. It's really to just get the gunk and the residue from years of being mistreated off. So same thing here, we're going to work around the sides till we can find a place that the hobby knife is going to slide under easily without damaging the cover. This one's being a little more stubborn. Here we go. So right at near one of the corners. Boom. And same thing, we're going to just be careful not to tear it off, not to break it. So we set those aside. So not all the outer shells separated. You're going to need a bucket or a container with some, as hot as you can get it from the tap, water and some distilled white vinegar. So basically, if you look, this is already filled for me with about 4 to 5 inches of hot to warm water. And we're going to add a decent amount of white vinegar. That should be enough. You don't have to go crazy because this stuff is pretty concentrated, and just a bit in water is going to make a big effect. Swirl it around a little bit, and we're going to dump all our parts of the controller in the warm water. Now, if you would have an ultrasonic cleaner that could actually fit all these parts in, it would be even better. I don't have an ultrasonic cleaner for the channel yet, but I am looking at getting one. But even at that, I don't think I'd be able to fit in all of these parts at once. So we're going to start today with the warm water in and white vinegar. For the buttons, make sure that they sink to the bottom so that they really do spend time in the white vinegar. And because white vinegar degrades corrosion, you can even throw the screws in. So I'm going to do that because my screws were pretty corroded. And I'm actually going to leave this overnight. The only part I'm not going to throw in here, just because the type of plastic, to my knowledge, could be damaged by the white vinegar a little bit, is the controller faces. But anyway, now that they're separated from the controller, they're pretty easy to clean. I'm actually not going to be replacing them. However, very simple. Once you have this done, you just basically a little bit of super glue on the back and they go right back on. The reason I'm not going to be replacing them is because my controllers, once we're done, in a second video, we're actually going to be modding the controllers in a pretty interesting way. Don't want to ruin too much of the surprise, but you guys should come back for that video soon. But we're going to go through the rest of the cleaning process and hopefully repair the broken controller so that when we get to those modded controllers, we have 2 completely functional ones. So this step, I leave it overnight. But through the magic of editing and everything, you guys, it's going to seem like just a few seconds that it was in there, but I recommend leaving it in the water with warm vinegar at least about 12 hours. And if you have any way of warming the water, I would do it. What I do is I try to switch it out with some warm water after about 6 or 8 hours, because obviously it's not going to stay warm the whole time, but the vinegar does act a little better when it's warm. So we're going to get back, we're going to see how the parts look tomorrow. In the meantime, we're going to be working on the PCBs and getting those working right away. Okay guys, so here we are. We're going to take a look at the PCBs while the rest of our parts are getting clean in our solution of water and vinegar. Now, if you guys watched my video on cleaning and repairing Nintendo cartridges that was published not too long ago, you'll recognize the cleaning kit that we're going to take a look at. But for those who haven't seen it, we're going to go through what we're going to use really quickly. So right here we have some distilled white vinegar. We have some isopropanol alcohol, 99% in my case. We have some Brasso if we need to do some really heavy lifting, and we have some WD-40 to help promote anti-corrosion and lubrify sometimes if we're really going to scrape hard. And we have a Brillo pad for in-depth cleaning, a toothbrush that's going to do the surface cleaning in the most part, and if we need something in between both, I have a denture cleaner, which is actually something that I recommend. And lastly, we have some Q-tips for really getting into those small corners. So overall, if you look at the PCBs, and I put some close-ups of both of them on us, the one without the remember, is the one that is perfectly functional. If you look at the PCB, especially at the D-pad section, you see that the contacts are fully black. The basic covering that helps promote the contacts is still perfectly in good shape. However, if we look at the one with the non-functional D-pad, you can see that the contacts are really worn down to the point where I'm wondering if someone came in here and tried to manually, but I'm not too sure. I think that maybe this is really just over time. Someone was really rough with this controller and actually managed to get the contacts worn down to this point. So we're going to start with cleaning nonetheless, just to see if that's going to actually fix anything, if we can get the promotion. I also have some spare replacement D-pad rubber, so we're going to try with a different D-pad rubber to see if maybe that was worn down on the inside and wasn't properly making the contacts on the non-functioning D-pad controller. So basically, without further ado, I'll explain to you the process. Same thing as last time. We're going to do it a little bit in accelerated. So for cleaning the contacts, what we're going to do first is we're going to use the toothbrush to spread some vinegar all over the PCB on both sides because it will reduce corrosion. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use the isopropanol alcohol to basically clean off the vinegar and clean off the PCB. And then we're going to basically hit it with some WD-40 in the case of the working controller, because we know that this just needs a cleaning, that the PCB is perfectly functional as it is. And we're just going to scrape down the contacts very lightly with the Brillo pad. But really just some surface work, just to say that if there's any grime on there, we're getting it off. But we're going to want to try and leave the protection on the contacts as much as possible. Now for this one here, we're going to do the same process. The only thing is we're going to work a little bit more on the contacts. Since it's already brushed off, we're going to see what we can do to clean off properly to make sure that there's no shorts in between the two contacts because of maybe surface metal that's gotten in the groove. So we're going to see what we can do about that one. We're going to test it with a different rubber, and then we are going to see where we're at. So the next process is going to be me some scrubbing. It's going to be accelerated for you guys, so enjoy. So here we are back at my test setup, and if you look, I plugged in our previously non-functioning D-pad PCB into the Nintendo system without it being back in its box, because before I reassemble it, I want to know if it's functioning. And I have here a set of replacement rubbers for the NES pad. So we're going to be able to test to see if we got this working before we actually put it back together. So back at Castlevania, let's just get that start button working. This is the hardest one to actually get working when it's not in the case. But there we go. So start button is working still. We're going to start with the A and B because these were working previously, so it's going to be less of a surprise to see if it worked or not. So for A, we have our guy jumping. Good sign. For B, we have our whipping. And now after the in-depth cleaning of the contacts, do we have a functional D-pad? Well, we have in walking right, walking left, and crouching, which means that we basically now have a functional D-pad as well. So basically what this needed was a really thorough cleaning. There was probably a short somewhere in the D-pad sector because of the worn out metal contacts. By scraping off the residue, we probably prevented that short, which was a really easy fix in this case. So we got lucky once again. We don't have to do any trace repair or anything. If, for example, this wouldn't have worked, what we could have done is taken a multimeter and tested each side of the copper contacts on the D-pad to see if there was actually current getting to the pads. If you don't have 5 volts, or approximately at each one of the pads, basically that means that somewhere in your trace, the current isn't getting there. But in this case, it didn't happen, so we've already got our fix. There is a possibility that the rubbers in the original D-pad were so worn out that they weren't making the contacts anymore. We'll test it out with the original rubbers. If it doesn't work after putting everything back together, I'm just going to be using this replacement kit to do it. But I always try to keep the originals if possible in original controllers. This is really plan B when you have a fully non-functional controller. So now that we know that both our PCBs are in perfect shape and in working order and now perfectly clean, let's get back to cleaning the shells and the rubbers of the NES controller. So we're going to get to the next part of the cleaning process. So now we're getting to the last step for cleaning the outside of our controllers. So normally controllers at this point have spent at least 12 to 24 hours in the vinegar solution. Simply, it's not very tough. You're just going to dump out the vinegar solution, making sure not to lose any of the parts as you do so, and replace it with some warm water and some regular dish soap, which I've already done in this case. You're also going to need some paper towels to basically set all your parts out as you clean them. And you're going to need some scrubbing tools. So I use a toothbrush and the denture brush I spoke about previously in the PCB. We didn't end up using it because the PCB was cleaning up very nice on the inside. And now it's the less fun part of basically taking each part one by one and scrubbing as best you can to get what's left of the grime and dirt that didn't come off over its time in the vinegar solution. Now just to tell you, for the scratched up outsides of the controllers, you can't do any miracles. In the sense that you're going to clean them off as best you can, but most likely the scratches for one are not going to disappear, and for the dirt that's really deep in there, there's not much you can do. In my case, if you're just looking at making your controllers perfectly functional and able to game and make sure that there's no gunk and crud on it, you're going to be perfectly happy with this cleaning method, because the most important thing is to get those rubbers on the inside and the PCBs as clean as you can. The outsides, we do what we can, but in my case, as I said earlier, I'm not actually going to be sticking back on the front faceplates on the controllers, okay? The reason why is because I'm getting prepared to actually mod these controllers and paint over them. So if you're really wanting to get rid of these scratches and gunk, the really only 100% way is to either use a hydrogen peroxide solution and basically bake them in UV light to get as much of it out as possible, but the scratches will still be there. Or number 2, which is what I'm going to be doing in a future video. Today we're going to be just drying them, cleaning them, putting them back together and seeing how you can get your controllers in perfectly functional shape. But in a future video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be using sandpaper to basically sand them down, and we're going to be repainting these controllers in a pretty awesome modded fashion. So if you want, so basically I'm going to do the first couple of parts as you guys are watching, and then we're probably going to speed through the rest and catch ourselves for the after the reassembly process to see how all of this turned out. So here we are at the end of our video. We're going to look at the final product. And like I said before, I didn't reinstall the cartridge front plates because in my case, like I said in a future video, we're actually going to be repainting these controllers. So it was actually useless for me to reinstall them. But normally it's pretty simple. You take a little bit of super glue, put some in each one of the 4 corners, reapply, and boom, you have it. Your faceplate will be right back on your controller as usual. So we're back at our testing just so that you guys can see that reassembled the controllers. If we start a new game, our first controller is, hold on, we're just going to wait for it to start. Here we go. So right, left, jump, hit, crouch. So we have one fully functional controller. And if we take our second controller right here, plug this one in, and we have right, we have left, we have crouch, we have jump, and we have whip. So as you can see, both of our controllers are now fully functional. In both these cases, it was just a good cleaning. One had to be a little bit more scrubbed down on the contacts than the other, but overall, that's all these 2 controllers needed to become fully functional again. Half of me is almost hoping that one day we're going to have controllers that actually need a better fix than this. I mean, on the lucky side, for me, it's less work, but I'm really looking forward to getting to videos at one point where we're going to grab a controller and we're going to have to do some serious work for an hour or 2 on it to get it to work, just so that you guys can see more interesting content. But, you know, unfortunately, I don't control what's wrong with the products I get, so we're going to have to wait till we get something a little bit more interesting to get into a real in-depth fix. So overall, I mean, not perfect, but much better than they were at the beginning. Like I said, for the scratches and the really in-depth scuffs, there's nothing you can do other than sanding it down and repainting it. That's pretty much the only way to get rid of all of that, which we're actually going to do in a future video. But for today, I hope you guys like the content, like to see what a basic cleaning and basic fix on, you know, on a Nintendo controller looks like. As usual, please like and subscribe for, you know, help the channel grow and keep growing. And I hope I'll catch you guys in my next video.